Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, another American peace activist killed by the Israeli military.
26-year-old Ayşenur Eygi is the third activist from the International Solidarity Movement group to be killed by Israel in 2 decades.
Israel says her death was an accident, something they've said before. Why her family and those of other Americans killed by Israel are demanding an independent investigation. I'm Natasha Del Toro, and this is The Take.
I met her here in Palestine, and she only had arrived a few days before. Friday was our first day in the field together.
This is Mariam Dag. Mariam is a pseudonym. She's asked us not to reveal her name for her safety. She's a volunteer with the International Solidarity Movement, a Palestinian-led group that works with activists from abroad to protest Israeli military actions in Gaza and in the West Bank. Ayşenur had just started as one of their international volunteers.
She was really keen and looking forward to start supporting families and communities that are under threat of ethnic cleansing and attacks from settlers and harassment from the army.
On Friday, September 6th, a small group of ISM activists had planned to join a demonstration against a settlement expansion in the town of Beita, south of Nablus. Ayşenur joined them. They arrived and sat in a garden on a hill facing the outpost.
As we reached the garden, there was already Israeli army outside the garden on the side of the settlement, and they saw us, and they saw the Palestinians were there as well.
The protest started out as peaceful, activists chatting with the locals and watching as the Palestinian demonstrators held Friday prayers.
Aysenur was Muslim, so I saw that she was praying during prayers as well in the garden.
A short while later, it was time to leave. And as they were leaving, they noticed Israeli army officers standing a bit further down the road. Things started to get chaotic.
In that moment, some confrontations between the Palestinian youth and the army ensued, and the army started throwing immediately a lot of tear gas. And soon after, they also started shooting live ammunition. After they shot live ammunition, the crowd, we kind of retreated down the hill, and the army advanced. So there was a standoff point where we were in an olive field, and the army was above us on the hill.
One of the activists was filming.
You can see the soldiers up there by the black smoke. There's 3 there, there's 2 there. There's some on top of the building. They're pointing guns at us. You don't know when they're gonna pull the trigger. It's very intense. The people are very powerful here. They're yelling back and standing strong.
Mariam says some of the soldiers were on the road, and one was on the roof of a Palestinian home. But that for a moment, it seemed like things had calmed down.
Nothing was happening in our vicinity. We were standing in clear sight of the army, and we were not doing anything. All of a sudden, I heard 2 shots of, there were 2 live ammunition coming from the direction of the army.
So I was just sitting by the dumpster, and supposedly a bullet just hit the dumpster.
One hit a metal object, and then I discovered that it bounced and they injured a Palestinian teenager. And after the second one, I heard my friend that was calling me, Mariam, come. And so I went towards where my friend and Ayşenur were standing, and I see that Ayşenur is on the ground, unconscious. So I go closer. Her eyes were rolled back, and there was blood that was coming out of her head. At that point, I understood the severity of the situation, and then I called the other people that were around. There was an ambulance standing nearby. They put Ayşenur on the ambulance.
Mariam, are you going? Go with her. Go with her. Here.
I was on the ambulance with her to the hospital. I was saying, stay with us, stay with us. She was unconscious, but she still had pulse.
The ambulance took Ayşenur to the nearest hospital in Nablus.
There, they took her to an emergency room and they tried to resuscitate it, but she unfortunately died there, a few minutes after.
News of Ayşenur's death spread quickly.
American-Turkish activist Ayşenur Eygi was killed by a shot in the head from an Israeli sniper in the village of Beta, north of the occupied West Bank.
And before long, the news also reached her friends back home in the U.S.
I woke up on Friday to text messages from Ayşenur's best friend with a lot of missed calls and texts. And when I opened my phone, it was, Ameer, please call me. Ayşenur was martyred in Palestine.
Ameer Al-Khatahtbeh was Ayşenur's friend. In the days after her death, he wrote an article memorializing her.
Ayşenur was such a sweetheart. She was a gem and a big loss to everyone that knew her and loved her. She just had this magnetic energy to her. You know, everybody who knows her, everybody who has met her, instantly felt like they've known her for their entire lives. Last time I was in Seattle, we got funky ice cream and we tried these crazy flavors of anchovies and ice cream. It was so bizarre. And we just spoke all night about zodiac signs. She was so silly and goofy and fun, and she had this energy about her. You just get lost in time with her.
Ayşenur's friends have been sharing their memories of her with Ameer as a way to cope with their grief.
One story that I was told by her best friend was she would go in the kitchen and she would set a timer, give herself a theme, give herself a fake background and story, give herself ingredients, and then pretend as if she was on the show Iron Chef. And she would run around in the kitchen and try to cook something that was concoction. And everyone thought it looked stressful, but to Ayşenur, she was having fun, and that was a way of her expressing and sharing joy with a lot of her loved ones.
Ayşenur's friends say she had a big heart, and Palestine had a big place in it.
She's done a lot of activism for Palestine. She was involved with the encampment protests in the University of Washington.
At her graduation earlier this year, Ayşenur draped a keffiyeh around her shoulders.
She organized a fundraiser in Seattle, and she got all these artists together to fundraise for Palestine. But she was really compelled to do more and help. And so after she graduated, she had booked this trip to Palestine to volunteer. She just wanted to do more. She was raised in America. She came to America when she was 1 year old, and that's all she's known. She's an American citizen. And I think the U.S. needs to do a better job at protecting its citizens. This was so uncalled for. Biden had said that if you harmed in America, we're going to come after you. And look, Ayşenur is American, and no action has been done. Instead, he wants Israel, who committed a murder against Ayşenur, to conduct an investigation on her murder. That's not fair. That's not fair to Aisha. What Ayşenur would have wanted was pure justice and accountability for her murder. So, the United States not fulfilling the family's request and not pushing for a personal investigation, I think, is not doing justice for Ayşenur and her murder.
The Israeli army admitted that it was, quote, highly likely their troops fired the shot that killed Ayşenur, but said that her death was an accident, that the bullet wasn't, quote, aimed at her, but directed at the main instigator of what they described as a violent riot. It took 4 days for the Biden administration to publicly acknowledge that an American citizen was killed by Israeli soldiers. At that point, the family still hadn't heard from them. Secretary of State Antony Blinken described the killing as unprovoked and unjustified.
No one should be shot and killed for attending a protest. No one should have to put their life at risk just for freely expressing their views. In our judgment, Israeli security forces need to make some fundamental changes in the way that they operate in the West Bank, including changes to their rules of engagement.
When reporters asked President Joe Biden for his reaction, he seemed to repeat Israel's talking points.
What's your reaction, sir, to the killing of the Israeli admission that they probably killed the Turkish activist in the West Bank?
Find more detail. Apparently it was an accident, ricocheted off the ground, and he got hit by accident, but I'm working that out now.
Witnesses, including Mariam, dispute this claim. They say Ayşenur was targeted by an Israeli sniper who shot her in the head from a nearby rooftop, and that she'd posed no threat to Israeli forces.
They've been spreading lies since then. They were spreading lies. First of all, there were rumors that activists were throwing rocks, which of course was not true. And then that there was an agitator nearby. This was a deliberate shot towards someone that was in clear sight of the army. They were just standing and not doing anything.
Biden said in a statement on Wednesday that he was outraged and deeply saddened by the death of Ayşenur. He cited a preliminary investigation by Israel that found it the result of a tragic error, resulting from an unnecessary escalation. He went on to say there must be full accountability, and that Israel must do more to ensure incidents like this never happen. There was no mention, however, of what Ayşenur's family, including her father, has been calling for: an independent investigation.
Aynı şeyi Amerikan hükümetinden de bekliyorum. Çünkü Ayşe
Because Ayşenur was 10 months old when she went to America, she studied in the schools there. She grew up with the freedoms there. She is a citizen of that place. Therefore, the American government also has a responsibility.
Amerikan hükümetinde sorumluluk.
The U.S. government has heard this call for an independent investigation before. After the break, we hear from the parents of another American activist killed by Israel about why they're still asking for one 20 years later, after their daughter's death. Hi. Before we continue, we really want to know more about you and how you feel about our podcasts. So we have a brief survey for you. Stay tuned to the end of this episode to find out how you can have your say. Ayşenur Eygi is not the first ISM volunteer or American to be killed by Israel.
The Israeli military has killed numerous Americans, including teenagers Mohammed Kadur and Tawfiq Abdel-Jabbar, World Central Kitchen worker Jacob Flickinger, 78-year-old Omar Assad, journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, peace activist Rachel Corrie, and many more. And they faced no consequence for it.
Prem Thakker is a political correspondent and columnist with Zeteo News and has followed several cases of Americans who were killed by Israel and sees the same pattern.
The response from the Biden administration to Americans being killed by the Israeli military, or to any number of alleged human rights violations against Palestinians, journalists, doctors, volunteers, has largely been the same over and over, that they're pressing their partners in Israel to investigate. It's evidently not sufficient for U.S. to call for Israel, the perpetrator of alleged human rights violations, to investigate itself. Over and over, that's led nowhere and has, in fact, sometimes led to the Israeli government outright lying to America's face, and the U.S. moving on, and the whole cycle repeating itself.
It's a cycle that the Corries have become all too familiar with over the last 2 decades, since the killing of their daughter, in a case with many parallels to Ayşenur's.
The statement that's coming out from Israel right now saying that this was unintentional is very familiar to us, because immediately they talked about what happened to Rachel being an accident. And we needed a reliable investigation to come to the truth. I'm Cindy Corrie, the mother of Rachel Corrie.
And I'm Craig Corrie, the father of Rachel Corrie, who was killed by the Israeli military when she was crushed to death in southern Gaza in 2003.
Rachel Corrie was an American peace activist who was killed in Rafah while trying to stop an Israeli bulldozer from demolishing a Palestinian home during a protest against a settlement expansion.
The 23-year-old wore a fluorescent jacket during the peaceful demonstration in front of the house in Gaza. An Israeli bulldozer knocked Rachel down, crushed her with its blade, and then backed up and ran over her again.
Personally, I remembered how I felt the day I got the news about Rachel. There is just this kind of sickening feeling that one has, knowing that you've lost a child and that your life is forever changed, and wondering how you could ever go back to something normal.
Tears a hole in you again to hear that this is happening to another family.
So for me, it was horribly devastating, really, to hear, as the details came in, that here was another person from our region, like Rachel, someone who had just graduated from the University of Washington, Rachel from the Evergreen State College, another young woman who felt compelled to live her values and had made the decision to travel to the West Bank.
Like Cindy said, we know to a certain extent what that family is going through, how they feel, how desperate they are for some sort of help and clarity. It's a certain kind of hell that in the worst possible day of your life, it is also the most public day of your life. And so it's very sad, very concerning, and for the family, and then angry that this could continue to go on to this point with the previous American citizens. And let's not forget about the Palestinians that are being killed, more than 40,000 in Gaza with this latest genocide, that more isn't done so that this actually stops.
The Corries have been trying for years now to get accountability. Following Rachel's death, the Israeli army opened 2 investigations. Both cleared its soldiers of any wrongdoing. The Israeli military police investigation, which had been demanded by the U.S., wasn't ever made fully public.
It wasn't released to the U.S. or to our family, but individuals who were allowed to read it said they found inconsistencies, numerous inconsistencies in that report. And they had additional questions, and we had additional questions.
2 years after Rachel's death, Cindy and Craig filed a civil suit against the State of Israel.
So then we had court proceedings. But in those, the Israeli government is also trying to do everything it possibly can to exonerate its people. The outcome was that the Israeli courts found completely on the side of the military and blamed Rachel for her own killing, basically.
The judge absolved the military and wrote that Rachel's death was an accident she brought upon herself, stating that any reasonable person would have stayed away from the area she was protesting. Through the years, the Corries met with multiple U.S. officials, including Anthony Blinken, who've cast doubts on Israel's investigation of Rachel's case, but haven't done anything about it.
And when I think about that still, and think about the kind of military support, the kind of diplomatic support, the kind of cover that the U.S. provides for Israel, and now with this terrible situation in Gaza and in the West Bank. But that has happened throughout. It's just almost unbelievable that they could allow then for questions about the killing of an American citizen, an activist, to go unanswered. So for those reasons, we have really emphasized to everybody that we're able to talk to the need for an independent, impartial investigation.
In the days since Aysenur's death, Cindy and Craig have been in touch with her family.
It's a very difficult journey that they're on. And I think we need to support them, send our love to them. I guess I also said that they need to find what they want to do, how they can, what sort of voice they want, and none of us has the right to criticize what they do in this awful time.
We want to be available to help them in any way. And so I just want them to know that that support is there, but also they just need to take care of themselves. It was Palestinians who told Craig and me, there'll be time to do this work. You need to take care of yourself and your family. We just wish them the very best. Our hearts are with them during days that we know are so terribly challenging now, and will continue to be.
And that's The Take. At Al Jazeera Podcasts, we love to hear from listeners like you. So if you have a few minutes, please go to aljazeera.com/survey and tell us about you. From things like how you listen to us, to what kind of shows you want to listen to, or even topics you would like us to cover. Again, that's aljazeera.com/survey. I can't wait to read your answers. This episode was produced by Tamara Khandaker and Shraddha Joshi, with Duha Mosaad, Ashish Malhotra, and me, Natasha Del Toro, in for Malika Bilal. It was edited by Noor Wazwaz. Our sound designer is Alex Roldan. Joe Plord mixed this episode. Alexander Locke is The Take's executive producer, and Ney Alvarez is Al Jazeera's head of audio. We'll be back tomorrow.